Hey data fans, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at topological data analysis.
TDA.
TDA, right. So it's kind of a new field in data science, and I think
Yeah.
it's super interesting. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, people say that you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, TDA is kind of like seeing the whole forest, not just
Yeah.
each individual tree. So,
That's a great analogy. TDI helps us see the overall structure and data. It's like making a map. But instead of mapping out actual places,
right.
we're mapping out the relationships and patterns within data itself.
Okay. Makes sense. So you mentioned shapes earlier. So what kind of shapes are we talking about?
Right. We're not talking about your typical squares and circles.
Okay.
It's more like higher dimensional shapes.
Yeah.
They can represent clusters or trends or even holes in your data.
Holes in the data. I'm not sure I get that.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
So imagine you're looking at data like from a network of sensors. So traditional methods might tell you if, like, let's say, one sensor is broken.
Okay.
But TDA could reveal a hole in the network. It could be a sign of a bigger problem that you might totally miss.
So it's not just about finding patterns, you're also finding problems.
Exactly. And it's not just sensor data. TDA is used all over the place. From understanding proteins in biology to predicting the stock market. I mean, it's everywhere.
That's really cool. So how does it actually work? Where do we even begin? I know the Frontiers article talked about 4 steps.
Yeah, let's break it down. So first, you got to build structures on top of your data, like you're building a scaffolding.
Okay.
Then we extract topological information from these structures. It's at this point where we start to see those shapes and holes.
Okay.
But we can't just assume all holes are important. That's where the third step comes in.
Right.
We got to make sure the information is actually meaningful, not just random. Then finally, we use that information, those topological insights, for more analysis.
Okay, I think I'm getting the big picture. Now, I remember metric spaces from math class. Can you explain how that relates to TDA?
Sure. In simple terms, a metric space just means we have data points, and we know how to measure the distance between them.
Okay.
It's like having a ruler for your data. TDA uses special distances, like Hausdorff distance, to compare entire data sets, not just points.
So instead of measuring between 2 trees, we're measuring the distance between 2 forests.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're building these structures, or measuring distances, and we're looking for these insightful holes. But how do we, represent these shapes mathematically? The article mentioned something called simplicial complexes, which sounds a little intimidating.
They're not as scary as they sound. Just think of it like connecting the dots. You connect data points to make lines, triangles, and even higher dimensional shapes.
So it's like a constellation of data points.
Yeah, precisely. And the way those points are connected, that tells us something about the shape and the structure of the data.
Okay.
And that leads us to the nerve theorem.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me about the nerve theorem.
So imagine you have a bunch of overlapping circles, like a Venn diagram.
I got you.
The nerve theorem says that by looking at those overlapping circles and the shapes they make, we can actually guess the overall shape of the object that those circles are covering. It's like looking at slices of cake and figuring out the shape of the whole cake.
Okay, that's a really good analogy.
Okay.
So we're building these complexes and using the nerve theorem. We're looking for those holes. But how do we actually, explore that topological landscape? I mean, data can be really messy and complex.
That's where we use something called the mapper algorithm. Think of it like making a simplified map of your data.
A map? I thought we were already talking about maps.
Well, it's a different kind of map. It takes your complex data and turns it into a network, sort of like a subway map. Each node on the map is a group of data points that share something in common. And by looking at this map, we can quickly find clusters or trends or those important holes.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for your data.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The way we create this map using what's called a cover, it really affects what we see.
Okay.
It's like choosing the right lens for a microscope. Different lenses show you different things.
So choosing the right cover is important.
Absolutely. This is actually both the power and the challenge of Mapper.
Okay.
It's very sensitive, so even tiny changes in that cover can uncover new things. So it's great for finding subtle patterns, but it means we need to be careful how we use it.
Fascinating. I read that Mapper has already been used in some real-world stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Researchers have used it to look at cancer data. They found subgroups of patients who respond differently to treatment. They've even used it to understand how cities change over time.
Wow, that's amazing. So we've explored and mapped our data using Mapper. But what if we want to go further? How do we actually rebuild these shapes that are hiding in the data? go from a map to a 3D model.
Well, that's where we get into geometric reconstruction and homology inference.
Yeah.
It's kind of like taking a puzzle and putting it together,
Okay.
Figuring out the whole picture.
How do we actually do that?
Yeah.
Do we need a 3D printer or something?
Not exactly. So imagine a bunch of data points scattered around.
All right.
To rebuild the shape, we basically grow balls around each point. It's like inflating tiny balloons. And as they grow and they start to overlap, they start to reveal the shape underneath.
So we're filling in the gaps between the points.
Exactly. And as we inflate these balls, we can track how the shape changes. And that's where homology comes in.
Homology? Didn't we learn that in biology?
It's a term used in both, but it means different things. In TDA, it's about finding holes in a shape. And these holes, they can be different dimensions. They tell us a lot about the structure of the data.
Wait. Different dimensions of holes? Like, I'm picturing a donut with a hole in the middle.
But yeah, it's not just about donut holes. A single point, it doesn't have any holes. A circle has a one-dimensional hole, like the donut.
Right.
But a sphere, that has a two-dimensional hole, like the inside of a balloon.
Okay, I think I'm getting the multi-dimensional hole thing, but how do we measure these holes?
We use something called Betty numbers.
Okay.
Each one tells us how many holes of a certain dimension there are.
So if we get the Betty numbers for our data, we have a mathematical description of its shape.
Yeah, like a blueprint of the data's hidden structure. It shows us the obvious patterns, but also those subtle connections you might miss with other methods.
Okay, that's really cool. So this brings us to persistent homology, right? What makes it so special?
Remember those growing balls around the data points? Well, persistent homology is all about tracking what happens to the holes as we change the size of those balls.
Okay.
It's like zooming in and out on a map, seeing different things at different scales.
So it's like watching those balls inflate.
Right.
And seeing which holes stick around.
That's a good way to think about it. But instead of a video, we use diagrams. Persistence barcodes or persistence diagrams.
Diagrams. Okay. Tell me more. I'm a visual person.
Yeah.
How do they show that persistence?
Okay, so imagine a barcode. Each bar is a hole in the data. The length of the bar shows how long that hole lasts as we change the scale.
Okay.
So a long bar means the hole is a big deal. It exists at lots of scales. A short bar is a more fleeting feature.
So it's like a ranking system for holes. The longer the bar, the more important.
You got it. A persistence diagram is similar, but instead of bars, we use points on a plot.
Okay.
Each point is a hole, and its position tells us when it appears and disappears as we change the scale.
So the further a point is from the diagonal, the more important it is.
Precisely. And these diagrams, they're not just pretty pictures. You can analyze them mathematically. You can compare them to see how similar different data sets are based on their topological features.
This is all super interesting, but I got to be honest, my brain's getting a little full. Are there any examples of how this is used in the real world, like something to help me put it all together?
Absolutely. One cool example is in material science. Researchers use persistent homology to look at porous materials, like foams or ceramics. By studying the holes in these materials, they can predict stuff like strength or conductivity.
So they're using it to make better materials.
Exactly. And it's not just materials. People are using persistent homology in image analysis to classify cells, or in neuroscience to understand brain activity, even in music to tell different genres apart.
Wow. Never thought holes could be so useful. But I'm wondering, are there limitations to this? Is there anything persistent homology can't tell us?
Well, one challenge is that it's based on distances between data points.
Okay.
So if the data is noisy or has outliers, it can mess things up.
We have to be careful about cleaning our data.
Right. And another thing is that sometimes it's hard to interpret the results. You might find a persistent hole, but figuring out what it actually means in real life, that takes some thinking. You need expertise in that specific area.
It's like finding a buried treasure, but not knowing what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But even with those challenges, it's a really powerful tool. It helps us see data in a whole new way, uncovering hidden stuff we might have never seen otherwise.
Yeah, this has been mind-blowing. From inflating tiny balls to finding these persistent holes and figuring out what they mean. Amazing. But wait, the Frontiers article mentioned persistence landscapes. What are those?
Those are another way to look at the information from persistence diagrams. Instead of points on a plot, we make functions, kind of like a mountain range.
Okay.
The peaks of the mountains, they match up with the persistent features.
Okay, I'm picturing these mountain ranges, but I don't quite get how they relate to those diagrams.
Imagine taking a persistence diagram with all those points. Now turn it sideways and think of each point as the top of a mountain.
I see.
The height of the mountain shows how persistent that hole is. Connect the peaks with smooth curves, and you have a persistence landscape.
So it's like a skyline instead of a barcode. But why even bother making these landscapes? What's the point?
Well, persistence landscapes, they have some cool features that make them easier to work with than persistence diagrams. For one, you can treat them like functions. So we can use a bunch of math and statistics tools to analyze them. It's like we're taking that topological information and making it more flexible.
So we're translating from math language to a language that statisticians and computers can understand.
Exactly. And since they're functions, we can even do things like, find the average between different landscapes. It opens up all sorts of possibilities when you're comparing data sets and looking for those subtle differences in their shape.
That makes sense. But I'm still trying to see how all of this connects to machine learning. We found these holes and made these visualizations. How do we use that to actually do something? Like make predictions or solve problems?
That's the big question, and a lot of people are researching it right now. One exciting application is to use those topological features, like the ones from persistence landscapes, as inputs for machine learning models.
So we feed the computer these topological summaries instead of just raw data.
Exactly. And because they capture so much information about different scales and the overall shape, they can be really powerful for stuff like classification or making predictions. It's like giving the machine learning algorithm a much broader view of the data.
Okay, I can see that. But machine learning algorithms, they aren't really built to work with these abstract shapes, are they? How do we make that work?
That's the challenge. But people have come up with some smart ways to make those topological things into something that machine learning can handle. One way is to use kernels. Those are math functions that measure how similar things are. And we can design special kernels that work with our persistence diagrams or landscapes. Then we can use all those kernel-based machine learning methods.
So it's like a translator, helping the machine learning understand the topology.
Exactly. Another way is to transform persistence diagrams or landscapes into vectors, just lists of numbers that machine learning algorithms are comfortable with.
So we're turning those shapes into numbers.
Right. And there are even ways to build TDA right into neural networks, which are some of the most powerful machine learning models.
Wow, so TDA isn't just a separate tool. We can combine it with machine learning.
Yeah. And that could lead to models that are better, more accurate, and easier to understand. It's like giving machine learning a whole new way to see data.
It's really cunning, but I remember you mentioned TDA has some limitations. Do those get in the way when we try to use it for machine learning?
Well, one big one is just how much computing power it needs. Calculating persistent homology and working with all this stuff, it can take a lot of computing power, especially with huge data sets.
So even with all these cool techniques, we're limited by our computers.
It's definitely something to think about, but researchers are always working on faster algorithms, and computers are getting more powerful all the time, so I think that'll be less of a problem in the future.
That's good to hear. But even if we have the computing power, what about understanding the results? If a machine learning model makes a prediction based on these topological features, how do we know why it made that prediction?
You're right. That's really important. If we want to trust these models, especially in things like healthcare or finance where it really matters, we need to understand how they work. So researchers are trying to find ways to visualize and explain those topological features that are driving the model's predictions.
So we can't just have a model that works. We need to know why it works.
Exactly. We need to be able to explain it in a way that people can understand.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. We started with those basic ideas, explored persistent homology and persistence landscapes, and then saw how we can use TDA to find hidden patterns and even make machine learning better. What a deep dive.
It's been great talking about TDA with you and our listeners. Hopefully, it's inspired people to think about data in new ways and explore this field.
Totally. So to our listeners, if you're interested in using shapes and holes to analyze data, I encourage you to look more into TDA. There's so much to learn, and you might even discover the next big thing.
I agree. Keep those minds open, keep exploring, and most importantly, have fun.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into topological data analysis. We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration of the data universe.